Welcome to our product managers and to founders event, Insights into the Journey. Today we have joining us on stage three fantastic people that I am just bubbling with a lot of energy here. I'm so happy that they're here today. And instead of me going through everything that they have done, and believe me when I say they have done just about everything, I'll let them self-introduce. Here's a screen of them, and we'll start with Miles Montes, and we'll go down the line. Miles.
Thanks, Alan. A pleasure to be here and appreciate the invite. Yeah, so I'm the co-founder and chief product officer at DocSpace. We're, at DocSpace, we're here building the Shopify for clinicians, which is pretty exciting. I won't go too much. Do you want me to go deep into my background?
Let's keep it light for now, because you'll have an opportunity to bring that out when it's your turn.
Excellent. Thanks, Alan.
Yeah,
All right,
Alan,
coming
thank
up.
you so much for having
Polina?
me too. I'm Polina. I'm currently a founder of Side Project, and Side Project is helping aspiring product managers, designers, and engineers gain practical experience by basically helping them form teams for side projects. So when the time comes to interview, you're actually having a real project to talk about, and do not talk about theoretical decisions that you have to make as a product manager, for example, but actually talk about the real stuff that you have done.
And I love that niche that you serve. And Jim?
Great. Yeah, it's really great to be here. I'm Jim Semick. I'm co-founder of Product.Plan, which is product roadmap software. We're a platform for product managers, and we're based in Santa Barbara. And I'm really excited about this topic because about 10 years ago, I made the switch from product manager to become co-founder of Product.Plan, and excited to talk about all of the pros and cons of doing that.
I love it. Thank you three for welcoming yourselves into our event and introducing yourselves. Just to kind of give everyone a preview of what's going to go on today, we have three major thematic questions that we want to ask our founders today. And we invite everyone to comment and give reactions in the chat. For any questions that you may have for the founders, we will have that all in the end. In addition to that, we also have, on top of our three themes that we want to cover, we have what we call a entrepreneur lightning round, or the founders lightning round, where if you have a question that you've always wanted to ask three founders and what their take is on that, now would be the time to be thinking about that and have that queued in. You can post your questions that you want to ask in the Q&A, and if selected, we will invite you onto our screen and stage, the virtual stage, and you can ask them live. Without further ado, today's event, product managers and founders, as you can tell, every one of our participants here, every one of our panelists, they were at some point a product manager, and now they're a founder. Now, each individual has a unique story that I just want to spoil for you, but I can't do that. And so instead, we're going to go right into the first theme right off the bat. Let's talk about fundraising and persevering. And for this one, this theme is aimed at Miles Montes. Miles, we know that based on your background that you are going through fundraising today, actually. Could you tell us about that experience? What's that like to pitch to investors?
Yeah, I think maybe before diving into like pitching investors, I think all of us can attest to pitching, internally as a product leader within the, our own companies. And it's not very much different. I think there's really a change in mindset or framing when you're internal, right? You're really looking to pitch to get buy-in internally. And so you're really going into someone else's space or your executive space. And you really have to bring and tell a story. And telling a story is not any different with investors. The only difference is that now they're in your space and you're giving them an opportunity. And you can't be happy to be there because investors see that, and so it's really about being, well prepped, having a story to tell, and being able to have the audience that you have connect with how you're telling that story. As you kind of go down the fundraising landscape, you're going to be meeting with different types of people. You might be meeting with other former product leaders that are now investors, right? And so they're going to know a little bit more deeply around the product and maybe your roadmap and asking more technical questions. Whereas you might get some folks that are operators and they really want to know the economics behind your business. Or you might have people who are more from a marketing lens, right? And they're going to want to know like who you're selling to, and are you the right founder to sell to that market, and how big is that market? Are you expanding the market, or are you tapping into the existing market? And so a lot of those are super important questions, and part of it is really doing your research and due diligence before going down that path. And I think we can all attest to that, right? In terms of, really prepping before pitching.
Appreciate that, Miles. And I know you're fundraising for your product. Could you actually share with the audience what it is that you're working on today in greater detail?
Yeah. So, DocSpace is building the platform to help start, grow, and manage online practices for clinicians. So in today's landscape, right, or I guess over the prior to the last 20 to 30 years, clinicians have had the opportunity to start their own practices and go and be independent. But over the last 20 to 30 years, you started to see a lot of consolidation happen with hospitals and private equity firms kind of gobbling up all of these independent practices for revenue purposes and talent. And so you start to see there's a high barrier to entry now, right? There's high medical debt costs. The cost to actually open up your practice from a retail space standpoint is super expensive. And so the point in time of where we're at today is exactly where e-commerce was 10 years ago when Shopify tackled this problem. And so how do we make it easier for clinicians to start their businesses, right? And when I say clinicians, I don't just mean doctors, right? I mean optometrists, dentists, therapists, orthopedists, right? Like it goes on and on. And so how do we help med students and residents and fellows actually start their businesses, for one? And how do we also help the existing clinicians that are a part of this hospital system or working for telehealth companies start their own side gigs, right? Because these clinicians actually want to be independent and they want to own their own businesses. They don't want to rent out patients. And so that's where we have a strong belief in that, we want to bring independence back to clinicians.
Appreciate that, Miles. And I can see the passion veering off you right now. And speaking about fundraising and passion, Jim or Polina, do you guys have anything to add on this theme about fundraising and really persevering?
Sure, I can jump in with a different perspective. When we decided to found Product Plan, we had conducted our market validation and talked to, before we launched, we talked to 70 different product managers about the problems that they faced with product road mapping and communication misalignment within the organization. And we looked at the product that we needed to build around that. And we made a conscious decision really early on to bootstrap our company. And that's it. It has worked out really well for us. We've been able to grow organically, and the company's doing quite well. And both my co-founder and I had some prior success, so we were able to bring that expertise into the company. But it does come with trade-offs, and the trade-offs of deciding to not raise funds, and that is we it needed to be very, very crafty about how we went about building the company, and hiring people that maybe they wanted that opportunity at a really small bootstrap company. It also meant that we couldn't hire enough engineering talent that we wanted to grow quickly, and so we had to be really clever about how we went about growing the company. And I will say that what it gave us, what that trade-off gave us, was the ability to, rather than spending time fundraising, which Miles is spending a lot of time and a lot of passion around raising money, it allowed us to focus early on the product. And so my co-founder and I played the product management role, and we're both heavily engaged with customers at that point. And so I think that made it so that we could get to market quickly with our MVP, rather than raising funds. But as I said, there are so many trade-offs to doing that.
Polina, I can see you have a smirk on your face. Anything you'd like to add?
Well, basically, I agree with what Jim said. And, I just know that with my first company, we were heavily focused from the very beginning on getting the funds. And it was in my head one of the central points, and it became one of my central responsibilities, so I was severely lacking time working on the products. And I think back then I was lucky that my two other co-founders had an opportunity to focus more on the product side. But having had this experience in the past, when I was thinking about my second venture, I was thinking consciously about what kind of niche I can find that I can avoid doing fundraising, so. And in my case, it was, when you're building digital products, you really have to build a team. You're dependent on having great engineers, having great designers. So it's kind of, I look up to Jim that he managed it without doing the fundraising, but usually it's kind of really, really needed, And in my case, I was thinking, okay, if I go more into the service side of the things, then it's basically on myself to build a great service and really spend 100% of the time to talk to the potential customers. And this is what I did. And as Jim also said, I was able to basically present the MVP, I think, within the weeks. So in my case, it was a program, but it turned out very well because I was in constant communication with people. So this is one point. And the second I wanted to add, actually, before I started fundraising the first time, this kind of idea of pitching it to investors was so new to me that it was frightening. I have never done it. I have never prepared a presentation for investors. So it was like a huge burden in my head. But at some point I realized that, us PMs, or actually anyone in the world, we're always selling something, So, and in this case, you're just selling your vision to investors, but being a PM, you're selling your vision internally. Being a human being, in the family, you're selling your vision to your partner, so he also supports you. So that's why it's nothing like super superficial, super crazy that you're doing when you're trying to fundraise your funds. So it's just everyone is human. So that's why I approach it as a human, and basically keep in mind that you have to become a good salesperson in the end of the day,
I
That's a
love
great
that.
point.
So what we have here is we have Miles, who is fundraising for his first venture today, or first couple of ventures today. Jim, who instead of fundraising, bootstrapped it, and Polina, who has experienced both. And between the three, they've covered every spectrum about fundraising, if you think about it, and whether to pursue it or whether or not. What a great panel this is. And this leads me into my next topic for them. Let's talk about risk and motivation. And this question is actually geared to you, Jim. Jim, you're an established thought leader and you blog a lot. And so there's a question I have for you, which is, in your experiences and even in the companies you've been with, what are some behaviors, some concepts, or even approaches you had to unlearn from your product manager life so that you could be the founder that you are today?
Yeah, absolutely. There were a lot of things that I had to learn and unlearn. As a product manager, when I was launching new products, I was the first product manager and wrote the product requirements for GoToMeeting and GoToWebinar. So some of the earlier, and GoToMyPC, some of the earliest SaaS products. And those were all fairly big gambles. And in the case of GoToMeeting, it was an established market. The online meeting market was established. And we decided to enter that market with a faster, better, easier to use product. And that was just drop dead simple. And there was significant risk to that. And if I were the founder of the company, I probably would have been lying awake a lot more than had I been as the product manager. And granted, if I had failed doing my market validation or launching with the wrong MVP, or maybe the product misses the mark, I could have been fired. But that would have been the extent of it. I wouldn't have, the company wouldn't have failed because of that. So I think that is something that product managers need to unlearn, is that it's no longer other people's money that you're playing with. It's, the risk has increased exponentially. And so a product manager needs to be comfortable with that risk. And for me, because I had the experience of launching other products, and then prior to Product Plan, I helped launch AppFolio, which is another B2B SaaS company based out of Santa Barbara. I learned the steps to take to reduce risk. And so the wheel for product managers does not need to be reinvented if you're deciding to launch your own company. That there are ways of successfully launching a product and successfully launching a new company. And so I had the luxury of being able to learn from all these other people, and that made it more comfortable for me to tolerate the risk. And just to be clear, I laid awake at night a lot, and it was also, launching Product Plan was an incredibly thrilling time too. So that kind of counteracts it. And then in terms of motivation, the other thing that for me counteracted the risk was that I had smaller children at the time. I had a mortgage. And as you can tell, I'm a little bit more, let's just say, seasoned, right? So there's a lot more risk of doing something like this. It's not as if I, was in my mid-20s, and if it fails, it's no problem. I'll just go get a job and, and then kind of, lick my wounds and then come back and try it again, a few years later. I had this feeling that this was my opportunity. This was the chance to do it. And so for that reason, I was exceptionally motivated. And that almost made the risk kind of pale in comparison to making this thing successful and having the drive to make it successful. So I was highly, highly motivated. And I'm sure Paulina and Miles are highly motivated with theirs too.
Miles, is there something you'd like to add as someone who is relatively, compared to Jim, just entering the space?
Yeah, prior to DocSpace, I was at another startup called SLX that I co-founded, right? And that was the first startup that I kind of jumped into right after being in a corporate, cushiony job. You make the jump with like fully knowing that like you got to make it happen, and it's kind of something that I think I've grown up with, and probably has a lot to do with like being a first gen kid. And so, there was a period of time where like we started fundraising at the wrong time. And it just kind of so happened that it landed that way. We had fundraised from like October, and you don't want to fundraise during the holiday season because investors like to go, on their holiday vacation, and you end up kind of waiting. And so, and there was a point in time where I actually had to take out money out of my 401k, right? Like that's not something people want to do, right? But like, yeah, you have to be comfortable with risk. And I knew that when I joined that company from the beginning, it was me and the other co-founder. That was it. And then by the time we got to fundraising, there was like 6 of us. So to Jim's point, right? Like it's no longer you fail and you're out of a job. It's you fail and everyone on your team is out of a job. And so, there's a lot of stress. There's a lot of high pressure. And so you got to do a lot of things to, keep yourself going every day and maintain your mental health. And just have a strong belief that you're going to make it happen. And, we ended up raising a little under $1 million for that other company. And so, suffice to say, it's, you got to be comfortable with risk. And I think product managers at our core are comfortable with that, especially with the many types of product decisions we make along the way.
Wow. I'm speechless over here. But I also know Polina has something to add because she was nodding vigorously at what you were saying, Miles.
Well, let me just say one more thing too, actually really quick. What I will say is that, fundraising is not the goal, right? Like to Jim's point earlier, even in my discussions with my current co-founder, we rather build product, and I still have a team that I have to manage from a development standpoint. So having to like manage both, like you want to show traction, right? You don't want to have to go out and fundraise and sell your product in your company. You want to go out and fundraise because you have all this traction and you don't have to work so hard, right? Because your product is doing so well and you're focused on building your product out, and that's your number one priority. That fundraising ultimately just your product and your company sell itself. And so I don't want to glorify fundraising because it's really not any fun. And I think you'll find that many founders prefer not to fundraise.
Agreed. Building product is so much more fun.
Yeah, fundraising is just hard work and it's not appreciated. When you're building product, at least you see results, you see happy customers in the best case, And when you're fundraising, it's kind of like everything happening behind the scenes. So nobody really appreciates the whole effort. Yeah, but I wanted to add also to the topic of risk taking and motivation. I think, I don't know, maybe it's not a popular opinion, but I think, being a first-time founder, I was very naive and I have underestimated all types of risks. So now I'm approaching it from a very different perspective, but it helped me also to get started. So, so you're just feeling like, okay, so other people are kind of doing it. I can try. It might work. It might not work out. But I had like a strong belief that the odds are not against me, and I think this belongs also a little bit to, entrepreneurial mindset that despite every no that you're getting, you still have to like really, really believe in yourself. And back then, I mean, it was 8 years ago, I was not really understanding why serial founders were not in the same boat when I was saying that, well, it's going to be fine, it's going to work, and so on and so forth, because all the stats were saying actually the opposite, but eventually, I mean, the company was acquired, so it kind of worked out, but it was also hard work and a lot of, work with your own brain, basically to persuade yourself. I think one other point that I wanted to add is, when you're assessing risks, I think one big mistake that a new founder can do is you might be afraid of doing it alone, kind of by yourself as a solo founder. And that's why you're thinking, okay, I have to get another co-founder into the boat in order to reduce this risk. So if you're doing it just because of this, just because you're afraid, it might turn out as the biggest mistake. So you literally, when you're trying to find the co-founders, it should be somebody who is like really complementing you, somebody who will add the value to the team. Otherwise, you're not reducing the risk, you're probably increasing it, right? Because many teams actually fall apart because of the issues in the team, in the co-founding team. So just keep this in mind and, just do it, just believe in yourself. And you will learn in the next couple of years how it will turn out.
It's so true. Every day there are people out there launching new companies and building products. And if they can do it, we can do it too.
You guys are all inspirations to me right now, actually. And everyone in the audience can also agree with that. And on the topic of building companies, this actually segues into another theme. And this one's kind of a spotlight a little bit on Polina. And on this theme, the mindset shift as a repeat founder, Polina, based on your experiences, and if you want to reshare with the audience what your experience as well, go ahead. You seem to have a bias for action. You have a bias to do it, right? And you've created some wonderful things. What are some mindset shifts that you have as a repeat founder? And how are you sustainable in all this?
Yeah. Okay, I will do a little bit of a recap. So basically, I've been a founder or like started my entrepreneurial journey, I think 8 years ago. And in this period of time, I basically started one company which was acquired, started another one which I'm running currently. This is a side project. And I started a couple of other projects which either I have abandoned because I lost interest or because they didn't survive the concept testing phase. So I did a couple of things. And I think during this journey, I realized many things. So probably it will be too long to cover here, but I will touch on some of them. So the first one is definitely like during my first startup, I eventually hit the wall and completely burned out, and I was, when I was reflecting on this experience, I realized that some things were completely unnecessary. Sometimes you're pushing for speed too much and you're trying like everybody's talking about the growth, fast growth, but this is not the only, this is not the only metric that you should be, targeting and being behind, and once again, being a first-time founder, you might have this naivety that you can make it. At the same time, you're lacking lots of experience of how to make it actually. So that's why many of the things, didn't turn out as well as I was hoping. And I have completely overworked myself, and that's why when I started approaching, my new ventures, my situation, life situation has changed completely. So back then I was mid-20s. I didn't have children, so no responsibility in terms of for somebody else. So I could do anything with my life, like mess it up as much as possible, don't sleep at night, insomnia, overeat, undereat, anything you can imagine, Nowadays, I have a small child and I'm pregnant with a second child. So, you have absolutely different approach because you realize that you have to take care of yourself because you're responsible not only for your startup baby, but you're actually responsible also for your children. So you have to have energy, you have to have like positive, power and so on and so forth to achieve different things simultaneously. So that's why I think from this case, I have adopted some of the, mindsets that actually product managers have. And it's basically, when we're building products, we are approaching it iteration by iteration. So we're not building, we're not expecting that next month we're gonna build the product which we have envisioned for the next year, right? So it's basically step by step. And this is how I approach now building my startups and actually building my life. So basically the next step should be better than the previous one, but it's not going to be perfect. It might not be in the speed that I have envisioned, but it should be improvement. So, and that's why it literally helped me, get more easy on myself, So that's why last year when I started 3 different projects and was running them in parallel, having my child basically next to me because there was pandemic and so on and so forth. In my head, it was all perfectly structured. I knew how much time I need to dedicate to different ones. And I knew already back then that I'm not going to be running 3 startups in 1 year. I knew that I'm testing and I really want to learn which of the projects is the most promising. So this was kind of like my iterative approach to what kind of idea I want to pursue, with what kind of team, and what do I want to achieve. So once again, I hope it's helpful, but just think about it. When you're approaching something, it doesn't have to be in your head, okay, this thing I'm going to sell for $100 million. This is my one shot in a lifetime opportunity. This is it. Just take it easy on yourself and approach it maybe as a side project, just spend like 10 hours per week on it, 20 hours per week, and then you will learn, So this is at least my approach and it's helpful.
Yeah, I like that approach a lot. I like what you said about the next step needs to be better than the previous step. That's a really good approach to building a startup. And yeah, and taking the next move to get you to the next iteration, whatever that iteration is, right? Iteration of the product or iteration of sales or iteration of marketing or any of it. So that's a really great approach.
Yeah,
Miles.
I'd add, I empathize a lot with that. I think when I first jumped in, it was, you want to go in full force and be a workhorse and do so much that you it's at the expense of your mental health a little bit, and maybe even your physical health, right? You forget to eat. And I think a lot of us kind of do that even in our regular day-to-day jobs too, right? Where you might skip lunch, but it's so important to have those boundaries for yourself, right? And to really take care of yourself, because you're gonna hit points where, as a founder, that you recognize that maybe you're pushing a little too much. And actually, I think I'm probably a little bit more emotionally intelligent now, and I understand my body a little bit more after becoming a founder, because I've hit a lot of those moments where I'm like, I could tell I'm doing too much, and I need to scale it back. And also having a co-founder who places an importance on that. Polina talked about having the right team, and finding the right people that complement you well. People that are gonna tell you when hey, let's scale it back, or I think we're doing a little too much, and the stress that we're now incurring, I feel is now impacting other people in my life, right? Being able to have those types of conversations are super important, because it's also, it's not just the health of your business, but it's the health of everyone around you. And when you can keep everything in a healthy environment, then you can make strides in your product and in your company. And also too, your employees see it, right? The people that, are part of your team, they can sense, right? One of the things I always say is your team is only as strong as you emotionally and mentally. So if you're not at full strength, your team is going to recognize that, and it's not going to be healthy for everyone else on the team.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add to this because this is like totally what I was thinking too. In my first startup, I was so not transparent with my team. So we could have been struggling so much with fundraising, but we felt we're not allowed to tell anything to my team, not to make them uncertain or not to feel bad and so on and so forth. But once again, just like Miles said, everyone is human and kind of like you feel it, and it feels even worse for your team if they feel it, but you're pretending that everything is perfect. So this is something that I definitely learned, that I'm not making this mistake again, because you're kind of like you're damaging yourself because you're feeling like, you're telling just the half truth. It is difficult to go through these difficult situations by yourself. And then once again, you're just lying to your people who are supposed to be your allies, so that's why this is very important, this transparency in the team.
I appreciate everyone's takes here. And over the last three themes, I think one of the things that we can all agree upon is that it gets harder when you become a founder, but you get better because you've iterated enough to be better, right? And you've learned, ideally, what you need to do or what should be done. And you also experiment fast enough to figure out what you do need to cover. And I'm very honored to be able to hear and join you all today in relearning these themes with you. I think one of the things we can do now, as a part of the fun gambit of our event, is a little glimpse we call inside the mind of entrepreneurs, right? Or the lightning round. And so for this segment, we are inviting audience members to ask and contribute questions that you would want to ask founders and entrepreneurs with a product manager background. The first person I'm going to call up on stage, I'm going to call up Jordan Leclerc. I believe you have a great question that can help start us. And then for the panelists here, no need for everyone to respond to every single question in terms of 3 people talking to one. Add what you feel is right. Jordan, you're on the line.
Yeah, hey all. Jim, we met before the New Venture competition.
Hey, Jordan, good to see your name.
Yeah. I'm a recent graduate and likely to be taking on an associate PM role if all goes well. What skills should I be most mindful of developing in this role if I want to, co-found a company sometime in the future?
Yeah, do you mind if I jump in? I have some thoughts on that. So from a product perspective, you're going to be getting everything that you need. If you stay in product management for a little while, you'll be able to understand the product development process, and along the way, I'm expecting that you'll be able to learn how to make prioritization decisions. I think that's one of the key skills you're going to need to make it as a founder, because every day you're going to be hit with not just product decisions, but you'll be hit with a lot of other decisions, and you can do 1 out of every 10 ideas that comes your way. And so the ability to have some sort of a framework for evaluating opportunities and so on, I think is really key. The other thing that you will be doing pretty much every day as a founder of a company is selling in some way. And that was an area that I didn't have much experience in founding Product Plan. And so I had to learn how to sell software. Especially in the early days, you wouldn't have the luxury of being able to hire somebody who has sales experience. So you really need to do it yourself. And that is the best way to learn from customers. And it's the best way to interact with prospects. And ultimately, you need to learn what that sales process is going to be. And you'll learn that through trial and error. So I think the ability to make decisions and prioritize sales abilities, that's going to get you really far. And then there's the whole business side of it, which is something that you should be educating yourself about. If you don't have a business background or a finance background, being able to read and be able to do the books, I think is a really important skill. So being able to understand that, and then to have an analytical mindset when it comes to metrics and for the business, and metrics for your product too is important. So those are some key things to consider if you have in mind starting a company in the future.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet.
That was a wonderful
Good luck.
question. And good luck to you. Hopefully you get that offer, and congratulations in advance. Let us know if you do get the offer, then I'll send you a real congratulations. We have a second question that's coming up. This one is actually coming from William's son, and I'll ask on their behalf. From product manager to founder, what is the most difficult transition challenge you have overcome? That is, change of scope, mindset switch, etc. And I guess I will point that question to Miles.
That's a good question. Yeah, I think for maybe just in my experience, because I think this is different for probably everyone. And so prior to me leaving ADP, where I was at before I went and became an entrepreneur, I had an opportunity to pitch my own project internally, and I had to work with our finance team, and that was my first taste of actually like looking at financial projections and unit economics. And if I'm being honest, I really didn't understand it 100%, and I had a lot of help from senior leaders throughout that process. But when I made the jump, I was the person that had to do all that. And so, we worked with somebody. I think that was probably the hardest part, learning the business side of things, because where I was at ADP, we kind of didn't have that type of interaction or that type of environment where we had access to that type of information. And maybe that's not such a good thing actually as a PM, right? But because it's good to kind of know how you're going to impact the bottom line. But now it was important for me to learn that very quickly. So I think that's probably at least for me, was the biggest, the most difficult transition. And I don't know if it was difficult. It was more just, like learning it. So I think for me, like I try not to frame anything as difficult. I try to just frame it as like, hey, I'm learning something new, and I got to learn it pretty quickly, and I got to understand it, right? And as an entrepreneur, you tend to have better resources or people that you can reach out to that are more willing to help. And I think using that skill set as a PM is important, because I know as a PM, right, I think sometimes we have moments where we might have a little ego, and we know that we kind of have to remove that. And as a founder, it's even more important to do that, and to have a mindset that, there's always something you're going to need to learn. And you're always going to hit another challenge, right? That's something that you don't know. Like scaling a company is a completely different challenge than taking a company from inception to launch, right? And so, or learning about an MVP. So these are things that I'm still learning as an entrepreneur. But I would say learning the business side of things was probably my first challenge as a founder.
Wonderful. And coming up next, now I'm actually excited to say her name. So Mila Markova, hint, hint, I think it's your turn. You have the spotlight to be the millionth caller of this session to ask our entrepreneurs here your question.
Awesome. Well, first off, thank you for hosting this event, and thank you for all of you for coming on here and doing this panel. I guess this question is kind of, for Polina. She hasn't had a chance to answer one. I was kind of wanting to ask, and this is in context of your business side project, what are kind of the best practices that you've found for networking and finding, collaborators and partners to help fill roles in the business? So, engineers and anyone, finance background, those sorts of things.
This is a good question. So I think for side project, it was my only resource was LinkedIn. And I was very big on cold emailing, like writing people messages, and it worked pretty well. So, I mean, I know sometimes when you want to meet someone, or like 99% of messages that I get on LinkedIn, they are not personalized. And that's why I like to, most of these messages I never reply, because I really do not know what people really want from me. But if you start to personalize messages and really, in a short format, tell people what you actually want from them, then you will have a really good response. So that's why in my business, it was critical to find great mentors. And these mentors were, for example, much more experienced than myself in product management or in design or in engineering. And I was just telling them my story, like very open, and was clear enough in terms of like what kind of help I need from them. And I would say probably 80% of the messages that I was writing, even if they were cold messages, I got the response. So, and then this is what I encourage actually everyone to do is, many founders are building their startups in a little bit of kind of like in isolation in the beginning. So when they're building and they're not ready to release, they feel they have nothing to tell the world, And I think this is a big mistake nowadays, because social media is basically part of our lives, including LinkedIn for professional contacts. So that's why I encourage everyone to start basically telling your story even before you have something to launch. And this is, again, helped me a lot. I basically started sharing the story of how I'm building side project and why I'm doing it and what kind of help I need and what do I have to offer, even before I had something to offer. Basically, I got so much attention and so much support also from people I thought I will never get it from, So that's why I think this is kind of two things. Always be proactive, and be proactive about telling your own story, and just try to approach people that you really need, and be also specific in terms of what kind of help you're expecting from them and what you have to offer.
Awesome. Thank you. And Alan, if I'm able to ask one more question on behalf of a friend. So curious, for anyone who's able to answer, all three of you, if you want to jump in, my friend has an idea, it's been validated, has like a team ready to build it. What's kind of the next step? How do you get started in creating the business entity? Like, what resources did all of you use or recommend?
That's a great question. Do you mind if I jump in with a few thoughts? Just actually creating the entity, there are 1,000 resources out there for you to do so. My suggestion is get a lawyer friend, or if you have legal resources, understand the entity type that you want to create, but don't spend a whole lot of time on this. Don't spend a lot of time, my opinion only, don't spend a lot of time naming the company. Don't spend a lot of time figuring it out. Make the negotiation about equity arrangements with everybody super straightforward. Don't make it overly complex, and get to building your product. If you've done your validation and you have customers ready to buy, when your product's ready, then get to building the product, and then get that in front of people along the way. So go through the lean startup method and get that in front of potential customers right away. Get something valuable right away. And there are literally tons of resources out there for you to do the basics of, do I incorporate? Is it a C corporation? Do I do an LLC? And so don't spend a lot of time wrestling over that.
I just have to add, because I agree with everything what Jim said. Do not overthink like this, operational side of things. I mean, with earning money before I incorporated it anyway. Because for me, the ultimate test or validation for the product was if people are ready to pay money for this. And they were paying money for already 2 cohorts of it. And I'm like, okay, it's the year is ending, so I'll have to prepare my books. So, but I have now the reason actually to spend all the time, for creating the entity and to prepare everything that is all clean and so on and so forth. So that's why do not overthink it. And maybe in your case, maybe you can do something like pre-sale of your product already, even though you're still building, but you can create some kind of, action around it. And this will be kind of the next step of your validation for the product and so on.
Miles, as someone that's going through that, like quite literally right now, Is there something that you could add to this?
Nope, they said everything. Just build your product. And I think for us, I mean, we're past that. We had an MVP. We generated 160K in revenue off of it. Like if you can generate revenue off it, go build it. Stop. Don't waste time. Like he said, like you can figure your branding out later. You can figure out the name of your company later. That all that stuff is just not that important.
Yeah. Appreciate the words of wisdom there. I want to ask a question on behalf of an anonymous attendee. Feel free, audience, if you guys would like to continue asking questions, and we'll get to them. This question comes for everyone here. What is the main thing you would go back and tell yourself when you first started as a founder? And let's go with, I'll go round robin on this one. Keep it short if you can. Polina?
Oh my gosh, I hope it doesn't sound too negative, but this is basically what I would say myself. Life goes on even if this venture fails. Don't be too hard on yourself.
Ooh, that's a good one. I like that. I would probably choose for mine, I would echo what Polina said earlier about moving faster. Even though I had a lot of motivation around building it, there were things that I look back in hindsight and I think there are things I could have skipped. There were things that I could have moved a lot faster on. And if I had some sort of insight now into those things, I would have executed so much faster and different decisions along the way. I think any founder can look back and in hindsight say that probably, but I think there were some patterns there that I would have just moved faster on product, especially faster on product, faster on marketing.
Yeah, I think for me, it's just create intentional rituals. I think you go in and you kind of have all these habits. And I know Jim talked about like unlearning, right? You have all these habits that you've created in a corporate environment, or, whether you're in a corporate environment or in other startups, you kind of have to relearn or unlearn and create new intentional rituals around things that are going to help you be successful, right? Going to sleep on time, waking up at a good time, eating healthy, going on walks to clear your mind, reading. I find reading still like super peaceful for me. And I try to go on walks because it really helps me clear my head a little bit. So I could think a little bit more clearly during the workday. I've recently picked up meditation, which I've been doing the last few weeks. And I found that like, wow, it makes my job a lot easier during the day. So I would just say, being more intentional about the things that you do on a daily basis and setting some intentional rituals to really help you.
I love that. I think we have room for 1 to 2 questions, depending. We have a question from Marco. Marco, you are on the line now. Go ahead and ask your question and also mention where you're from too.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Hey, Jim, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Hopefully.
We can hear you.
Hopefully you can hear me.
Marco, you on the line?
Just having some trouble here. I'm muting myself.
You're doing great. We can hear you. Well, if it's okay, Marco, can you do a sound check? Are you able to ask your question? That's all right. I'll ask on behalf of Marco, and if he happens to have his audio come in, he can ask himself. But Marco is actually from... Hello?
Yeah, hopefully you guys can hear me okay. Sydney isn't really known for some of the fastest internet broadband in the world. But yeah, I have a question about entrepreneurial minds. They like to solve problems and they also love a good distraction. And I was wondering if you guys could talk about what are the traps to avoid, how to pick the good problems to solve and separate them from the time suckers. Do you have any tips on how to prioritize?
Ooh, that's a good one. That's a good one. I've been in this position a few times. And do you mind if I just jump in with a couple of thoughts, Alan?
Go for it.
When you're looking at a market and you're looking at a bunch of different problems in the market, and customers are telling you, like, I need to solve this and I need to solve that, it's really possible to take it all on. It's possible to say, we can do that. And maybe ultimately you can, but in the short term, you can't. And then the other thing that I think Marco is alluding to is the shiny object syndrome that we're all familiar with, right? We'll get working on something and then we'll start grinding through it a little bit, and then something else comes on. It's really much more, it comes up that's much more interesting, and we want to jump over to that. And so I think it's really important for entrepreneurs to take the world of possibilities and narrow that down to this small little thing. And then when you're developing your MVP, put together your MVP and then cut it in half, because what that half is that's probably truly the closer to the MVP. And I've always found that customers are willing to buy something less than what I thought. And so that's a trap to avoid, I think, is like, your eyes are big and the world is full of possibilities. Like, narrow it down as much as you can to this just tiny little niche product which may not be entirely satisfying or it's not going to change the world to you, but you can grow from that.
I love it. Well, we are almost at the end of our event, so I'll give any room for some last remarks from the three of you. Any last words, remarks, themes that you guys want to iterate to our audience? I will start with Miles.
Yeah, sure. I think most of us all started off, just being curious, right? I think as a founder, it's the same thing. You just got to stay curious and always be hungry to learn. And if you have those two things and you learn how to prioritize, there's a lot of questions around that today. I think, you'll figure it out. And you'll build the skill set as long as you kind of, spend the time. I think a lot of early in career folks want to just go straight into entrepreneurship. And I know I tried to do that out the floodgate, and I had a lot to learn. I think there's some wisdom to like earning your stripes and really understanding the product development process. So be patient. It comes with time. And when you feel like you're ready and you've had the lessons learned from building product, then make the jump. There's always going to be a level of risk, regardless, of where you're at in your career. It's just how comfortable are you with risk as you kind of, become more senior and ultimately make the jump. So that's it.
Thank you for those remarks, Miles. Jim, anything you want to add?
Well, I think that product management is one of the few jobs that you can have today that really prepares you to be an entrepreneur. And starting a company is really scary. Taking the leap, it's actually deciding to spend some money or take the leap to start the corporation or whatever it is. Actually taking the leap is a really scary thing. But if you've had even a few years of product management experience, you're better off than so many more people, than probably a large percentage of other people out there who've never started a company before. So you actually have some significant advantage over other people, and so take advantage of that. And it is scary, but you'll get over that.
Appreciate that. And then Polina?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that, before I started my first company, I worked as a PM for 8 or 9 months only. So being a PM it could be an advantage. So you definitely learn a lot of skills that you will use as an entrepreneur, but this is not a necessity, so that's why, anyone can be entrepreneur if you're nurturing your entrepreneurial mindset. So as Miles said, you have to be curious, risk taking, and you just, try things out. So I think this willingness to try things out. And the best thing of all is if you're a PM, you can actually nurture your entrepreneurial mindset within your organization, and everybody, I guess, would appreciate it, you know? So you're kind of like entrepreneur within your company for your product. So you can already, you know, test yourself and play around and imagine how you would be entrepreneur one day. But once again, so there are no prerequisites necessary to become an entrepreneur. I think the only one is like really, it's all in your head. You know, I love this quote. It's like, if you think you can, you're right. If you think you can't, you're also right. Right? It's all in your head. So just believe that you can and try it out, and it's gonna work out at some point. You know, I believe in you, and you know, all of us basically started without knowing if it will work out at one day. You know, so and some things worked out, some things didn't work out. It's okay. You know, you should be okay with kind of this type of outcome.
Thank you all for your words of wisdom. If everyone could give a virtual round of applause, I'll do it right now. But yeah, one day this will be in person. You can hear a room of applauses. But for now, you'll have to imagine it. Thank you three for being here tonight, Miles, Jim, and Polina. Really appreciate it. And folks, we've learned so much about what it's like to go from product management, being a product manager, into being a founder, and not just a founder, a repeat founder. Every one of these remarkable individuals shares that commonality. As a plug for all of these founders, you can find them on LinkedIn and reach out to them. And then I guess to ask Miles, Jim, and Polina, are there any other places where the audience can find you, quote unquote, that they should consider?
Yeah, I'll jump in.
Yeah.
Oh, I'll just jump in because I actually have to jump real quick. But if you want to be a part of the startup community, you got to be on Twitter. And so you can find me at Miles Next Door. And there's a pretty close-knit founder community. So yeah.
Appreciate
Thanks.
that.
Thanks everyone.
You're good to drop. Jim, Polina?
Yeah, LinkedIn.
LinkedIn
Great.
also.
Well, thank you three for being here today, and I will now be closing the event. If you'd like to connect with them on LinkedIn, go ahead and look at the chat feature today, click on the links. If not, you can look online, search them up. As a highlight of what's coming up, PMA.LA is now going to be focusing on producing another event, focusing on product market fit. So for all of you folks here who are thinking about starting a business and have maybe everything, you just need to know what's next, come join us for our event. Follow us on our newsletter / our LinkedIn. And without further ado, we can check the chat. You can also sign up for our mailing list. Going back to the end. Without further ado, I am now going to officially close this event. It is now 6:30. Thank you all for
Thanks,
joining.
everyone.
Thank you for having us. It was fun.
Bye.
Bye-bye.